What is up, Packers fans, and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Draft. Today, we are doing a positional preview, and it's an interesting one for the Green Bay Packers, the tight end room. The reason that it's interesting is Green Bay, basically in an unprecedented move, used 2 top 100 picks on tight ends in last year's draft and seemed to have hit, if not home runs, at least, solid doubles into the gap with both Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave. But there's still a chance that they might want to add a couple of specific roles to that group. And to have that discussion, I'm very excited to bring on my pal and really excellent draft analyst and Packers season ticket holder, Mike Renner. Mike, how you doing, man?
Doing fantastic. I don't know if I can take credit for being a season ticket holder. My family has some, but I go to a lot of the games still.
Hey,
not technically mine.
As a Packers family, those season tickets are like handed down in final will and testaments. So as far as I'm concerned, as long as that's the seriousness with which Packers season tickets are being regarded, then, you're a season ticket holder.
I think I've been on the list for season tickets since like 94 or 93. So I'm 3 or 4 years old at the time. So
yeah,
we'll see if
I'm hearing of folks that like prior to Super Bowl 31 that got on the list that are starting to get them.
Yes, it's starting to happen. I think one of my brothers actually is the reason why we got some nicer tickets this past year. So
very cool. Very cool. Yeah. I didn't put myself on the list. I might put my kids on the list, but once I got to be like 22, I was just like, well, whatever. It's what's the point now?
We'll see.
Just pay the secondary market or find a buddy or whatever. It's, plus I don't live there, but anyway, that's a long digression. If you would, be so kind as to explain to the good folks kind of your background. I'm sure a lot of folks here on the Daily Draft understand exactly who you are, but the Mike Renner 101, if you will.
So I started, I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, actually. Grew up there for 6 years before moving to Illinois. Went to Notre Dame. After Notre Dame, I started at PFF. I was one of the first 10 employees at PFF. And from there, worked there for 11 years until last spring. And now I'm currently unemployed. So still out there looking. We'll see what happens.
There you go. Hire Mike Renner, folks. Hashtag hire Renner. Anyway, diving in, and this is how we kind of start each show with the state of the room. And as I mentioned, Mike, I mean, as good as it gets, right? You have 2 and tight end historically. Now, last year's class flew in the face of that because Laporta, Kincaid, I mean, it was not just these Packers guys. But usually you're looking for like year 2 or year 3 for a tight end to produce. And both, and obviously it was by necessity. Ain't nobody else walking through that door. But both of those guys, I thought, won in ways that they're going to continue to win at the NFL level. Musgrave as a route runner and Kraft as kind of a yak monster. Just you're going to run some of that fake split zone stuff, get him the ball, watch him jump over somebody, watch him break a tackle, whatever. But as I said, if the Musgrave and Kraft picks weren't home runs, they were definitely doubles into the gap. And you'd have to feel thrilled about that room. Of course, Ben Sims a part of that, Tyler Davis being re-signed, but the big ticket items are Musgrave and Kraft.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's the best tight end room in the NFL, but you would argue that they need tight end less than anyone else in the NFL right now, I think, because of obviously how good both those guys were as rookies. Now, I don't think either are top 5 in the NFL yet, even top 10 in the NFL, but I think the potential is there from both, at least from what we saw as rookies, because of basically the nature of the position. I think you said it there, that it's not a position that usually succeeds as rookies. And so to show anything the way those guys did, Kraft on the stretch, Musgrave, obviously when he was healthy, very encouraging. And so I think they have complementary skill sets in a way that, obviously they weren't used in tandem much last year. I think you can do more of that this upcoming fall, and you almost want to. I mean, I think from what they both put on tape, you want them on the field as much as possible. So, definitely a lot of reasons to be excited about that tight end room.
For sure. And you think about, they do have a number of really versatile pieces. And I think both guys are. I think you can use both in line. You can use both detached from the formation. I don't think people understand quite how good Christian Watson has been as a big slot. He has inside-outside versatility. Jaden Reed mostly a slot guy, but he does jet stuff. Like there are a lot of different formations that you can get in with the same personnel, and that's I think really exciting part of this this tight end room, and that'll bring me sort of to our next topic, which has a little bit to do with the two incumbents, which would be Tyler Davis being re-signed. He's viewed, I think, by many as a special teamer, which is fine, and he's been okay on offense when thrust into that role, but sort of viewed as a special teamer. And then Ben Sims. And Ben Sims was somebody that they used on a 30 visit for last year's draft, ended up with the Vikings, was released, and then claimed by the Packers on waivers. And he played not at the level, obviously, but he played the Mercedes Lewis role. I mean, he was the blocking tight end. After week 10, I was just looking at the basic snap counts from your former employer there at PFF. And outside of, and there must have been an injury situation because for whatever reason, that win at Minnesota, he had 41 snaps. Every other game, it was between 12 and 20, 12, 14, 16, 12, 20, 16, 20. Like that was his role. He had the blocking tight end role. And so it's, do they try to upgrade from Sims? And is the DeGuara role, which was a failure and has been, you talk about the love of my life, Danny Vitale, and him not working out. John Lovett, they have tried a number of guys in that spot. Henry Pearson was the guy also, kind of kept around last year. And it seems like, especially using a top 100 pick, that Matt LaFleur is, he's lusting after his Kyle Juszczyk, right? I mean, he's looking for that guy. And there's a guy in this class. There's two that would be kind of crazy, but then there's a guy who is just like that guy for me in this class. Do you think that they're, because I mean, in a vacuum, I think you could roll the ball out tomorrow and just say, we're keeping 4 tight ends and they're the 4 we have, and we're just done. Right. But there's also do you try to upgrade Sims and do you make a run at your Juszczyk?
It's an interesting conversation, right? And it's one that I think I lean towards probably not addressing it because of how unsuccessful they've been, truthfully, when they do throw draft capital at it, right? Like, I think in this draft in particular, there's really only one guy I would even feel semi-confident succeeding in such a role. That's Ben Sinnott, the Kent State tight end. And even he, wasn't necessarily doing...
That's a spoiler alert.
It wasn't necessarily doing all the same things like that you would be asking him to do in such a role over at Kansas State. So I lean towards not addressing it, truthfully, and basically trying to work those two guys on the football field more, trying to work maybe Tucker Kraft into that role as much as possible when it's needed. Because I think from what we saw down the stretch last year, it just flat out wasn't needed, right, to run a high-end offense.
Yeah, and that's, you talk about, and we'll get into specific guys, but like, okay, if we're going to try to upgrade or replace Big Dog, well, maybe AJ Barner from Michigan. And I have, there are shorter tight ends in this class that I like: Jatavion Sanders, Jaheim Bell, and Ben Sinnott from Kansas State, like guys that I think maybe not the lead blockers, but the movable chess pieces that could potentially make sense. But man, the word that keeps coming into my mind is luxury, super luxury, like not one of the core things that you need to build your football team. It's more like, wouldn't that be fun, or wouldn't that be hard to match up with? Those are kind of some of those conversations. As far as, so we do talk in these and talk about Goody's thresholds, cornerbacks that are above 5'10" and a half, wide receivers that are above 195 pounds, 80th percent broad jump for offensive linemen, short shuttle and 3-cone are important for them for everything. Tight end is a mystery, man. And this goes back to the Ted Thompson times because, we have said, or I have sort of shown people that, my God, edge and tight end are very similar in the way that you can just take like Kent Lee Platty's relative athletic score, take that number, and then go by the consensus draft ranking. And if you just value that composite athletic score at both edge and tight end and a little bit of sort of who everybody thinks is good, your hit rate's going to be kind of sweet. I mean, that, like the freaks Kittle's a freak, guys, and he's not the only one. So is Mark Andrews. You go look at some of these super high level athletes, and of course there are ones that don't work out, of course. But like Ted and Goody took Richard Rodgers, Sternberger, and DeGuara, which were just not Packer level athletes. They just weren't. And all three didn't go the way they wanted them to. And then Goody just said, well, here are two 96th or better percentile athletes at the tight end position that everybody thinks are pretty good in Kraft and Musgrave. And away they went. And that really has been historically the ones that have hit. You have to be kind of a space alien to succeed at the tight end, because there's so many different things you're being asked to do. And there's so many different things you're being asked to do. Part of it is part of the difficulty of picking it up fast, I guess. A couple guys, that fit that category. And again, we are, or I am fully admitting and frankly agreeing with Mike that especially if we're talking about a traditional inline tight end, what are we talking about here? Because you're not even like, oh, well, we might not re-sign one of these two guys. So they got 3 years left of very cost control contracts. There's nothing you're going to do. But as far as the freaks, Theo Johnson, Tip Ryman, or Riemann, one of the two, and Ben Sinnott. And Sinnott is the one that has the apple of my eye. And that's because he can be Juszczyk. And so those are your kind of, and Jaheim Bell and Jatavion Sanders are both 84th percentile athletes or above, but those are your kind of freaks in this class.
Yeah, I'm pretty high on the first two of those, or I guess I can't remember the order now you said them, but on Johnson and Sinnott. Truthfully, those are my number 2 and number 4 tight ends in this class.
Okay.
Obviously, Brock Bowers is like the one who's not going to make it to the Packers at all come draft time. If he did, I would be willing to consider that, considering just how good he is and what he can do as a receiver, and being able to. Truthfully, he could be like a high-end fullback as well if he wanted.
I know.
Yeah. That guy's pretty nasty, but he ain't making it there. So discussing the ones after that, and yeah, it's really Theo Johnson's 257, 6'6". He is like a Jimmy Graham-esque type of tight end and what he could be at the next level. Ryman's more of a, truthfully, he's more of an inline blocker who has some speed. He's not necessarily himself dynamic, and I don't think he would add much to this tight end room. Like, he would replace Ben Sims if you're drafting a guy like that, and it would be on day 3 if you do. It's not the one where, if you are using a top 100 pick and they are still going to go tight end position, it's the one guy I could see them going. I have him as probably more as like a 3rd rounder. I think that's probably where he comes off the board after his athletic testing, which was very, very good. A guy who's like a high effort, great blocker, physical route runner, can still play a role even with those 2 tight ends. But again, it's a really far-fetched concept for them to do anything other than throw a day 3 shot at a blocking tight end, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's sort of where I am too, except for Sinnott. And that's that's my only guy there, because I'm around 5 on AJ Barner, around 7 on Brevin Spanford for Minnesota. If we're going to talk about giving Ben Sims some competition at the blocking tight end, I don't think you spend any high draft capital. Frankly, I don't see that guy in this class, because you have to have some receiving upside to be a top 100 pick. Nobody's taking the quote unquote 3rd tackle in the top 100. You have to have some upside in the receiving game. So the one guy that I'm interested in a conversation about is Ben. And that's because there are actual fullback reps on film, and they're good. He's an Iowa kid that went to Kansas State. He's everything you want to be about: tough, gritty, Midwest, played in the cold. He just is a Green Bay Packer. You look at, if they're excited about, okay, well, we finally took a swing on big time athletes at the tight end position and went, well, Sinnott killed the combine. Killed it. So I've been calling him Super DeGuara. That's who he is to me. He's Super DeGuara. And if they want to take him in 88 or 91, you aren't going to hear a peep out of me. But after that, like the fit stuff, I don't know who makes sense. other than when you start to talk about round 5, round 6, round 7, and some of these guys that you could maybe see as blockers? Are there anybody else besides Barner and Spanford that you see in like rounds 5, 6, and 7 where you're thinking to yourself, well, maybe that, maybe that's a Ben Sims competition. Maybe that's your low wattage Mercedes replacement.
No, truthfully,
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Truthfully, it's not a good tight end class.
Yeah.
And it's just, honestly, it's sad that Sanat is coming out this year and not in 2020, because if he was coming out in 2020, that man probably would have been a Green Bay Packer.
That's true. Guys that you like, and now we're just kind of, this is for more of just an informational part for people that are watching this. We're kind of removing ourselves from Packers land because, as you said at the top of the show, and I frankly agree, it's possible the Packers don't have, it's likely that the Packers don't have the best tight end room in football. I would, the guys at the top of the Chiefs room and the guy at the top of the 49ers room would have a lot to say about that. But you're right. They probably need one potentially less than anyone because of the cost control that they have with Musgrave and Kraft. So removing ourselves from Packerland, who are some guys in this class that you seem to be higher on than consensus?
I really like Theo Johnson, the Penn State tight end. I watch his tape, and I mentioned Jimmy Graham already, but just like that's the body type. He's got massive wingspan, massive hands, and then, all-time athlete. He goes 4.57, crushes pretty much every drill at the combine, and you just see a really easy mover on tape who, is a little rough around the edges. He's not a polished route runner the way like Brock Bowers is on tape. But at the Senior Bowl, he won more in the one-on-ones than anyone else. I just think his athletic traits are what tend to succeed at the NFL level as a receiver. It seems like only a matter of time with him, even if he's not there quite yet. So I have him as tight end 2 in this class. And I also really like Cade Stover in this tight end class. I thought he surprised me with what he ran the 40 at the combine. 4.65 is a time that can succeed at the NFL level, can really be a weapon. And he's the guy that he played defense at times at Ohio State. Like he fits that hard-nosed tight end, NFL translatable inline guy that everyone seems to be looking for. Maybe he's not have the high end that we saw like from last year's class or that we were talking about with guys like Travis Kelce or George Kittle. But I think he could be a top 10 tight end in time in terms of his all-around ability and how reliable he is as a pass catcher. So those are probably the two guys that I'm a little higher on and still see. Like Theo Johnson, I wouldn't balk at drafting him at the back end of the second round. And Cade Stover, I think, is a top 100 guy on my board as well.
Yeah, I like Stover quite a bit, but I'm doing the and by the way, guys, buy the draft guide. But I'm doing the Packers fit for our Green Bay draft guide for the tight end room, and it's not that I don't like Cade Stover, but I just wrote like this is maybe the least likely guy to be a Packer because even though he's not 6'6", and he's not, I still don't see him as the DeGuara role. I see him as what you just said. I see him as a real tight end. And frankly, the last thing the Packers need is a third real tight end. They have 2. Mm-hmm. So like to me, Stover's just not going to be a Packer. And that's not saying that he's not a good player because I kind of like him too, but he's just not going to be a Packer. Guys that I think are on the high end or guys that I think are, I may be higher on than most. And look, I think this is a pretty, not a super hot take because he's the number 2 consensus guy, but I really like Jatavion Sanders. I am not as obsessed with some folks with age and like breakout age and dominator rating and things of that nature. But when I look at how young Jatavion Sanders is, and I understand just how many NFL guys, and not that the Big 12 is a big defense league because it's not, but I look at what that kid did to the Big 12 when he was 18, 19, and 20, and I just see so much like more potential there. And no, he's not probably the lead blocker. When I talk about him and Bell from Florida State in the DeGuara role, they're not going to be dirty, stinky, nasty in the way that folks might want, but they could do some more like fun H-back stuff and fun slot stuff. And I really think that in sort of a Jonnu Smith kind of way, Jatavion Sanders is going to make it. And I don't care if it's lining up in the slot like he's Gerald Everett or whatever. I don't care. I really don't. I think the kid's going to make it. I like him quite a bit. And then I guess this is just my last opportunity to tell everybody how much I like Sanat, because that's my guy. Freak athlete, perfect fit for the DeGuara role. Has played fullback. It's on film. He's tight end 3 for me. And I know that maybe isn't even that crazy of a take either, but I mean, that's how strongly I feel. Bowers, Jatavion, Sanat. That's where I'm at. I think Theo Johnson was tight end 5 for me, and tight end 4 was Stover, but Stover's not going to be a Packer, as we just mentioned. So you and I are kind of in lockstep on a lot of this stuff, it sounds like.
So I'm lower on Jatavion Sanders. And
Fair.
I actually have a question. I was just wanting to hear your thoughts on this, because I see Jatavion Sanders, and to me, he's very similar to Brevin Jordan. And I just want to hear your thoughts on that take and how high you were on Brevin Jordan coming out versus kind of what he's been in the NFL.
Reasonably high, I think. And I could go into it. I'm actually doing kind of like a Packers redraft over at Packer Report. So I hope people like that. But let's look at my last top 300 for that class. And I had him. Yeah, I had him 77th. So that's where I was on Brevin Jordan, and I'm with you. And I'm also not ready to give up on Brevin Jordan for what it's worth. I mean, I think he could very well be on the slower, normal tight end development track. But yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying. I see what you're saying. I think he's a better athlete than Brevin Jordan. Mm-hmm. And that may or may not bear out when you look at the actual combine stuff. I'm not looking at him side to side, but yeah. I can give you Jonnu Smith and a couple of the other, more successful athletic slot / your 6'3.5" tight end types, but you can hit me with a Brevin Jordan. I see what you're saying.
Yeah. I just worry about guys who are shorter, lighter, and then not freak athletes, right? I think for tight end, especially, or either not freak athletes or not like already like high end route runners who look like, who are polished coming into the league, which with Sanders, with Jordan, I thought both are unpolished, and they kind of got that, they're both young. I think Sanders is actually 20 coming out, Jordan was 20 coming out like Sanders. They got the kind of, they're both young, they'll like figure it out. But I do think like receiving position, you only figure like the guys that figure it out are the ones who are like 4 or 5, like the George Kittles of the world, who are really high end athletes. So I just worry about those smaller guys who look like kind athletes at college. And then the NFL, it's like, well, they're not able to work that middle of the field and go up and get it the way a 6'6" guy can. They're not really can outrun linebackers because they're, mid-high 4'6" guys. So I'm just a little lower on Sanders, but and because I'm worried about, I was higher on Brevin Jordan than where he got drafted. Now, obviously, in retrospect, it's like the NFL was probably a little more right on that with where he went in the 5th.
Sure. No, and I understand that 100%. You said exactly. I mean, you look at like the composite score for Sanders and you see it 8.4 relative athletic, and you understand how much being 6'4", 245 drags that score down a little bit because it is height weight adjusted. Mm-hmm. And you think, well, he's a pretty darn good athlete. But then you look at the 4'6", 940, and you're right. I mean, if he's just a slot receiver, then he's kind of slow. Yeah. So I definitely see what you're saying, but I just, like I said, I think there's something there, and you're right. I mean, Brevin Jordan was young too, but I would be willing to buy the lottery ticket. Is all I'm saying.
They're not. It's not like a 1-to-1 comp either. Jordan had. I mean, Sanders has much better hands than Brevin Jordan, right? So Jordan had some drop issues coming out. Sanders has really, really good hands, really, really tough over the middle of the field as well.
I think Sanders
there are differences.
And I could be wrong on this. I do think Sanders was also quite a bit just more productive in general. And that Texas offense had a ton of mouths to feed. Yeah. Obviously, Bijan, Roshan, and then Brooks, and then A.D. Mitchell, Xavier Worthy. Like, there were plenty of mouths to feed on that Texas offense, and Jatavion still carved himself out a real role. So, All right, Mike, let's wrap this bad boy up. It might be one of the shorter positional previews, but they don't really need a tight end. So that's kind of what the deal is going to be. So we wrap up these shows with the gun to your head question, meaning gun to your head. The Packers have an extra 2 from the Aaron Rodgers trade, an extra 3 from the Rasul Douglas trade, and replacing the 5 they sent with Rasul is a comp pick from losing Allen Lazard to the Jets. So with 7 picks in the first 5 rounds, gun to your head, do the Packers take a tight end?
No, they better not. If they do, I'm turning that gun around on Goody, man. I'm joking, by the way. Don't clip that. But that's they can't, right? You're too good there. You have too much talent. I would rather take 2 wide receivers before I take 1 tight end in this class, truthfully. And that's like the wide receiver room's good too. But I just think that there's no path to a role that I would want. And again, even if it's like the fullback role, I would rather try Tucker Kraft in that than I would draft a guy in this draft class with a top 100 pick. So, gun to my head, I do not believe they will.
Fair enough. Yeah, we differ on that a little bit, but basically it would be Sanat or nothing for me. Mm-hmm. And then if that Lazard pick is a blocking tight end, I'm not gonna throw a fit about it. I think it's like 169. If you pick a blocking tight end at the end of the 5th, I'm just not gonna get in a tizzy about it. But
fair.
Mike, thanks so much, man. This was awesome. I appreciate you.
For sure. Thanks for having me on, brother.
All right, guys, as I mentioned, please buy the Green Bay Draft Guide powered by Packer Report. Use promo code DAILY as in the Daily Draft, DAILY, for 10% off of that bad boy. Check us out over at Packer Report. That first month is always just $1. And if you like us, you can easily just transition over to an annual subscription at a much lower rate. Do everything that you're supposed to do right here on the Pack a Day Podcast YouTube feed. Like, subscribe, click the bell, get the notifications so that you get every single bit of Packers content that you need on a daily basis. Have a great rest of your day, folks, and go Pack Go.